I thought I'd bring you a sort of relief from the crisis in Russia and the government running away from Moscow towards St. Petersburg and the mining of Rostov on Don, where indeed I have friends who are unable to get away. So, I'm getting regular updates. But I thought I'd bring you an alternative, and that is Lee Anderson's first program on GB News. So you've got Nadine Dorries on a Friday evening, and before that you can catch Lee Anderson, whose program, to judge by the one yesterday, is pre-recorded because he can't be trusted to say things live, and I presume everything needs to be scripted for him as well. So he had yesterday Nigel Farage, Vicky Michelle from Hello Hello. Well, I remember her from long ago. And Brendan Clark Smith and Adam somebody or other. Brendan Clark Smith well, we'll come to him in a minute. First of all, Vicky Michelle was marked 9 out of 10 for pulling a pint. She was particularly good on the way she pulled. Even by Hello Hello standards, that's fairly low on the bar. And a lot of this was filmed in a pub, so there was Lee Anderson taking time off from a working day in Parliament to film second-rate television, prancing around the place doing innuendo in a pub. I don't see this is quite what he was elected for. He's also supposed to be the deputy chairman of the Conservative Party. Is this what the Conservative Party is supposed to be? Well, let's have a look at his Wokey of the Week. Wokey of the Week with Simon Danczuk. Simon Danczuk was suspended by the Labour Party for sexting a 17-year-old girl. He was readmitted, but he didn't get selected to contest a seat in 2019. So he's an out-of-work MP. Now, there were various questions in his little section. It looked as if he was the bartender. I don't know whether he was. First of all, there was a question about why would anybody pay £24,000 for a tent in Glastonbury. Then there was some reference to the Rye College teacher. Well, that was about the child identifying as a cat, and then somebody being rebuked for not accepting that self-identity, and it's caused a bit of a furore. But I had a conversation with a person in the train the other day, and we came to the conclusion this story may not have been real, because there was a similar story about a month ago in American media. So maybe this story has been entirely invented. And then Lee Anderson always sounds a bit like a puppet, doesn't he? I think Thunderbirds are go, and Lee Anderson pops in with Mr. Men or something. And then he mentioned James O'Brien, who he said was impersonating a radio presenter. He was described as irritating on LBC. I must say, a bit rich, from one lump to call somebody else impersonating a radio presenter, particularly when one is impersonating the some sort of presenter of a TV program on GB News. Lee Anderson, puppet impersonator. Irritating on LBC, contemptuous really. Anyway, he won Wokey of the Week, and then we got to Brendan Clark Smith. Brendan Clark Smith. Now, Brendan Clark Smith, you may recall, on LBC a while ago, this really is C-list personality stuff. Brendan Clark Smith, another MP on LBC, had suggested that people should opt for inferior products during the cost of living crisis. And he referenced Heinz baked beans or Tesco value beans. And he drew bitter criticism on the Ian Dale show on LBC and afterwards for, of course, a problem that has been caused by our present government. And why should people be forced to lower their living standards because the government, and Liz Truss particularly, was having a hand job moment, and moving around in praise of Quasi's prodigious package? And you remember all her hand movements, the sort of hand movements that I suppose, frankly, Lee Anderson would be up to in his Thunderbirds activities. So he was given. We then had a moment outside the pub, sitting at a pub table, and Brendan Clark Smith was fed spoonfuls of cold baked beans. He complained about them being cold, by Lee Anderson. It's like a scene from Carry On. I must say, I don't think Brendan Clark Smith played up to it as well as maybe he could have done. If you wanted innuendo, I was only too happy. I am willing to go on GB News just simply for the baked bean test. Though I think I would protest at somebody of Lee Anderson's ilk putting it in my mouth. Anyway, so Lee Anderson was feeding Brendan Clark Smith baked beans. And the first one was a top brand of baked beans, or a supermarket, or cheaper brands. And the first one he got was something which he thought was a little tangy. But you're not going to spit it. You're not going to spit in it. He said, oh, extraordinary. Anyway, he closed his eyes as Lee Anderson popped it in. And the one he went for was oddly the Co-op brand. Heinz was dismissed as bland. I don't know whether this was some sort of setup, but two MPs skanking off on a Thursday, feeding each other with baked beans in a pub. It's scandalous, don't you think? As well as faintly puerile and rather seedy.